Hi and hello everyone. Welcome back to the PMP exam preparation course. So let's quickly jump in to topics. So knowledge management areas, the project integration management and project scope management. Let's get started. Project integration management. The project integration management, as the name says, it deals with consolidation of different activities and all those activities which are interlinked to one another are to be identified and gathered at one place to make a bigger sense. So this is the only knowledge area in all the 10 other knowledge areas which has at least one activity in all 5 process groups, right? So all other 9 knowledge areas, they don't have at least one process in all the process groups. So let's see what the processes are, and we'll get to learn each one of them. So the first thing is developing the project charter. A charter is a formal letter which allows the project manager to start the project activities. So secondly, we'll talk about developing the project managing plan. It refers to the integrated project management plan, which is a consolidation of all other planning processes. And directing and managing the project work, this is from the execution group actually, and it's all about work performance. Managing project knowledge. We have knowledge and experience from the past, so how to convert and use it to further create new knowledge which will help the project, right? So this topic is all about that. Monitoring and controlling of the project work. This refers to the methods of reviewing and reporting. Perform integrated change control. This is all about gathering all the change requests and approving the ones that are possible. Finally, the close project or phase. So all the finalizing activities are covered here. Before we move ahead to the explanation of the processes, it is important for us to understand what are ITTOs. Each and every process that we are going to learn going to have the ITTOs. And what is ITTO? They are nothing but inputs, tools, and techniques, and finally the outputs. Every process that we are going to learn is going to have these 3 steps. Process 1, ITTOs, process 2, ITTOs, so on and so forth. So you should study every process in this flow only, which will be very easier. So like, what are my inputs, what tools I should apply, and what will be the output of my process. If we study this way, you will easily remember all the 49 processes. Now, I keep repeating this enough that you should be learning all the 49 processes by heart, but I do not mean that you have to learn all the ITTOs as well. So you have to remember the processes, but not the ITTOs. But the importance is to be given about what happens to each process. So learn each process ITTOs, but you don't need to learn it by heart. Okay, we can jump in. The first process, developing the project charter. Before I start on the explanation, let me quickly brief you about how we are going to learn all these 49 processes. So as a project manager, you must be always aware of what is the target outcome for which you are doing anything that you're doing. Like, you must have a clear vision about what my actions are going to result in when I'm done with a set of activities. I prefer we should do this not just for the project management, but for every other thing that we do. Here, I have 3 key points that you should learn in each and every process. So the inputs, the tools and techniques, and the outputs. If you start learning these processes in that same sequence of inputs and then the tools and then the outputs, you won't be able to visualize what you're working for. So for example, in this very process, if you start studying for this process by learning what are the inputs first, and then the tools and then the outputs, we cannot keep up the motivation, right? So my suggestion to you is to start understanding the outputs first, right? Not the inputs. Learn what your goal is first, and then understand what inputs I have to, I have to achieve those outputs, and then look at the tools and techniques that you need to convert these inputs to outputs. I hope it's clear to you. I didn't confuse you. So you'll understand this method as I start explaining each process. So let's begin. Developing the project charter. The 2 main goals of this process are the project charter and the assumptions log. Let's understand these terms. The documents which authorizes the project manager to start the project is called the project charter. This can just be a single document for which the whole project, or if some project is too huge to be declared at once, the charter sometimes is also authorized in in phase wise. So phase 1 has a separate charter, phase 2 has a separate. charter. So remember one thing, this is needed to be developed by project manager, of course, but it cannot be authorized by the project manager. So there is a difference here. It will be authorized by the project manager's boss. So it's usually the higher management, the project sponsor who sponsors the project. He's the one who authorizes it. But the project manager has to still support in gathering the data. So we don't have to focus on what our format is going to be for this project charter, because every organization has their own set formats. So just know what a project charter is, and that's enough. And what about the assumptions log? What is an assumptions log? As the name suggests, this is nothing but a list of considerations that had not yet been proven yet, right? But they are necessary for the project to succeed. Let's take an example for testing a component. So for testing a component, we assume that there will be new testing machine installed. So we assume a new person will be hired to test this part, or an existing expertise will be used. So all these assumptions come under assumptions log. So what do we need to achieve these outputs? The project manager has to support these documents by providing a business case information to the approving committee. So like what is the demand, the organizational needs, social needs, so on and so forth. This business case is one such business document. That is an input. When we speak about agreements, this is something that is very, very important. Usually, any organization will work with a lot of vendors, and third-party organizations. From all such parties that are involved within and outside the corporation, there has to be an agreement of the work signed. So this will serve as a legal document later. You must have heard about the MOUs, the Memorandum of Understandings, the Letter of Intents, the NDAs, the Non-Disclosure Agreements. All of these are examples of agreements. These act as inputs for developing the project charter. And then enterprise environmental factors, organizational process assets. This topic is also touched upon. This is nothing but to follow all the rules, regulations, the methods of that particular organization. So always remember, no project should contradict the original ideologies of the organization, right? So if a question comes that something is contradicting the ideologies of the organization, always choose not to follow that option. Now that we have inputs and the targeted outputs, how can this be done? It can be done using the tools and techniques. So let's quickly understand what the tools we need for this process. Expert judgment. So this tool is going to get repeated a lot. So as I'm explaining it now, I may try to skip it later, considering the time again. So expert judgment. Remember that we are not currently talking about the development of the product. We are talking about developing a project charter. So here in this case, for this process, the expert judgment has to be taken for the business case. So, and the expert judgment has to be taken for the assumed benefits, the time plan. Usually what happens is an industry expert is consulted to verify whether our documents gathered as inputs are legit. Second tool could be data gathering. Data gathering involves brainstorming, lessons learned, bringing the internal experts together, in a group who has experience in working at this stage, before, of course, the product experts are also required here. Interpersonal team skills. We as a project manager has to manage the conflicts. We have to ensure multiple stakeholders involvement, managing the meetings, etc. I know, tough job. Meetings. In the meetings, the project manager has to drive the topic of discussion. He has to record the minutes of meeting, etc. So, clear with this process? Let's pace our learning in this method moving forward. I hope everybody is clear with the method. First, we learn the outputs, and then the inputs, and then the tools and techniques. So if we apply this method, it is quite easy to learn each and every process. Okay, so let's move on.